everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Melinda Lang. I'm the Director of Programs and Exhibitions at ISCP. And I'm delighted to introduce our speakers to tonight's Artists at Work talk. So I'm going to give some bio information. ISCP Artist in Residence, Verónica Gaona, is joined by writer and curator Alex Santana. Gaona will present on her practice and speak with Santana about her interest in the relationships between architecture, truck culture, and migration. They will also discuss the ephemeral material and spatial transformations produced and accelerated by migration and remittances. After their, we just had a long conversation about this very topic yesterday. After their conversation, they will take a few questions from the audience. Based in Houston, Texas, Veronica is a Mexican-American artist from Brownsville, Texas, a city along the United States-Mexican border. Her work incorporates the perspectives of displaced and exploited communities, highlighting aspects of the diaspora such as opacity, transnationality, and impermanence. Gaona's practice challenges traditional approaches to memorialization and seeks to subvert established power structures. She has exhibited work at Presa House Gallery, San Antonio, Lawndale Art Center, Houston, Laffer Art Museum, Houston, all in Texas, Charlie James Gallery in LA, and Museum of Contemporary Art in Mexico. Her work will be included in Flow States La Trienal 2024 at El Museo del Barrio this fall, I think October. Alex Santana is a writer, editor, and curator with an interest in conceptual art, political intervention, and public participation. She has held positions at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in DC, Joan Mitchell Center in New Orleans, Manna Contemporary in New Jersey, and Alexander Gray Associates here in New York. Her interviews and essays have been published by Hyperallergic, Q Art Foundation, Terremoto Magazine, The Brooklyn Rail, Precog Magazine, Next Haven, and Artsy. She is currently Associate Editor for Interventions, a publication of the Latinx Project at New York University. And then I just want to thank our many supporters who make these programs possible at ISCP. This program is supported by the Vision Fund, the Hartfield Foundation, James Rosenquist Foundation, Lina Saltos, Milton and Salary, Avery Arts Foundation, New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council, Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reniso, New York City Council District 34, New York State Council on the Arts with support of Governor Kathy Hochul, and the New York State Legislature. Dr. Samar Maziad, Sarah Jones, Van Buren Charitable Foundation, William Talbot Hillman Foundation, and Woodman Family Foundation. Thank you all so much to everyone who supports ISCP, and then thank you especially to everyone here tonight, and an extra big thanks to both of you, Veronica and Alex. So very much looking forward to the conversation. I will pass the mic over.
So maybe I'll begin just by sharing a little bit about how I got to know Veronica's practice. Last year in 2023, we had a presentation at the Lawndale Art Center in Houston, Texas, and invited me to write a short curatorial text about that show. After doing more research on your practice and seeing how many media you span, from photography to sculpture, performance, and also the kind of specificity in Tejano, specifically corrido kind of aesthetics, I knew that I wanted to have an interlocutor. I'm also a huge fan of co-writing and co-curating and just collaborating with other people. So I asked Itzel Alejandra Martinez to co-write this text on your practice. And we borrowed lyrics from Cosa Regida. We talked a lot about how your work touches on migration of people during life, but also after death, the migration or the movement of funds, as Melinda just mentioned with remittances. And I think your work is extremely interdisciplinary and pushes the boundaries of what a medium can offer in terms of a subject matter that's actually quite difficult to talk about because it's, has to do with death, which is a subject that we're all constantly struggling with and struggling to find the words to talk about what this actually means. So hopefully that's a good enough introduction to your practice. Yeah, absolutely. I know Veronica had some slides to share with everyone, so we're just going to be chatting back and forth about the images.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you everyone for your time and attention today. My research explores social-political events and social practices across international borders. Currently, I'm looking into the global Mexican diaspora, remittance, social, and building practices. Remittances is money an international immigrant workers send back to family members in their countries of origin to build the dream house. Most of my visual investigation is focused on the ephemeral architectural spatial transformation produced and accelerated by migration and money. Here is a photo of me standing against an old family house in Villahermosa, Tamaulipas, Mexico, a city in the northern part of Mexico and Texas. The border is less than 50 miles away. The region is highly militarized. Cartel violence is present. Economic conditions are unfavorable, and asylum seekers from all over the world arrive to this border to cross into the United States. Families often cross back and forth to visit family members, and mixed status families don't see each other for decades. Many people leave their home to find jobs or flee violence in their native country. As Mari Carmen Ramirez once said, she's a working curator of Latin American art at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. She said in her book called Home So Different, So Appealing, home is sacrificed for loved ones. That is, home is sacrificed for loved ones' safety and security. I also look at aspects beyond remittances, such as rituals practiced in working migrant families, such as sending cadavers, remains back to one's native country, placing flowers in burial sites, sending everyday goods, calling loved ones, paying construction workers, visiting construction sites to see the house improvements. And these two photos, I think, capture some of the ideas that I continue to investigate.
I really appreciate yesterday, Verónica and I had a free conversation, and one of the things we talked about is the kind of daily rituals that one takes, especially when you have family that lives elsewhere. So the idea of sending money transfer is actually like a ritual that you practice frequently that is a way of keeping and maintaining a connection between people who are separated. Also, acknowledging like what it means to earn in the US dollar versus other currencies. I think there are nations where their entire GDP is primarily composed of remittances. So it's entirely like a remittance economy. I don't think that's necessarily the case for Mexico, but certainly it is for other countries. And I love the image previous. I don't know if you want to scroll back.
Yeah.
But also the idea that, what's being sent over is not just, e-currency or currency that isn't physical or material, but it's also the idea of like sending someone's remains back is quite a poignant thing, especially when you tie it into this idea of like home or the dream of like where home actually is.
Definitely. I think home is something that I was always thinking about, because just growing in the border is sort of this point that you relate to. And so I was always relating myself into, and I started thinking about how home is not very permanent or very permanent. I was always thinking about home, or the idea of home being very subjective, and sort of like very subjective to experiences, people's experiences. And so I started thinking about those ideas through a variety of artworks that I'm going to show today. This is a work that I made in 2020 called The Houses and Us, where I start to think about the relationship between architecture and migration, and in the context of transnational relationships, within the remittance landscape. And so I was thinking about my family houses and sort of thinking about my multiple sense of being and as it relates to identity and place. And I also started working with these migrant bags that are ubiquitous there in Brownsville, because there's one street immediately crossing the border that's called Elizabeth Street, and there's like an international street where you see China stores that are cheap stores, like items for $1. And this bag was sort of very present there. I started thinking about how that relates to other communities and how home is not fixed. And I started moving. I started photographing myself in these houses, moving across some of the walls in the houses that my families were constructing, and thinking about the impermanence of these buildings and how they're there, but at the same time, the people that build these houses are not there. They're working abroad. And so I was really struck by the reality, the illusion of building a house and like seeing the reality there.
I also love how these plastic bags, I mean, anywhere in Brooklyn, you can see them at any bodega, well, maybe not any, but some certainly, as well as those kind of big plastic canisters or pools that you can, fill with objects to send back to your home country. So these items that carry things and memories and so much more. Just a great image.
Yeah, and I started to expand the way I think about home through just realizing how remittances work, being at the border, seeing these bags, and of course other experiences, research, and the work sort of like expanded really quickly after that, because I started researching and reading books about architecture. After I realized my fascination with how the built environment, it has how migration and labor has a real material impact to the architectural transformation over time. And so I was really fascinated by this book called The Remittance Landscape by Sarah Lynn Lopez. She's an architectural historian based out of UT Austin. And in her book, she talks about remittance landscape, which are buildings, public infrastructure, houses, or material ephemera. And then she also speaks about remittance space, which are intangible aspects of remitting, such as loss, other social rituals that are normalized over time, death, absence. And then after her research and my lived experiences, everything sort of like rolled off. Everything clicked, because I was looking at my lived experiences, but really thinking about academic material, thinking about research, thinking with other people outside of my field, which really I think is speaking to very broad communities, not just my own, because remittances is global. And these are two houses that she shows in the books, where the house, you can see how the house has this like modern look that is known like in the United States, and then this more rural look too, or more like Southern America. You see like colorful houses and the high ceilings that are associated to homes in the north.
For me, these really, we talked about the American dream, the house that's, fenced in and aspires to tell you a story about a family success or something.
Yeah, and she speaks about how there's a lot of situations that happen. Some houses are really successful. You can see that by the appearance of it, and then other houses are not as successful, and that speaks to the family's conditions, the consequences that happen over time. And so I was really fascinated by reading that and really associating that to the houses back home. And then during that time, at the same time, I was working on multiple projects. I made this piece called Drag, made with Fabriano paper, soaked with human residue, roses, Rio Grande water, and dirt. This was part of my thesis show at the Black Art Museum, made in 2020. And this piece commemorated the lives of Salvadoran daughter and father, Valeria, Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez, and Angie Valeria, who drowned while crossing the river. And during this time, the migrant protection protocols were executed, and a lot of migrants were waiting in the Brownsville, Mexican border. And during that time, I was crossing back and forth. So just seeing how some of the similarities were similar, like the inability to cross and death. And I think that's why my approach to some of the work that I made is very subjective, and leaves room for interpretation, or leaves space for the viewer to sort of relate to it.
I was just going to ask if you could quickly touch on a little bit from the process of making this work. What was that like?
Yes, so the process was field work. So I would get my field recorder, my camera if I needed it, but I would not photograph the space very often. It was more like gathering materials. I would gather dirt, water, sounds, to make these works. And so I gathered buckets of dirt, water, and I produced rose water. So I got a bunch of flowers and made rose water, because roses is an act of like acknowledgement and closure for families, or is a funerary ritual. And so that was the material that is in the paper, and I wanted it to look like a landscape, and just like maybe unstable landscape or fragmented landscape, to speak about for immigration policies. This is a close-up. And then during that time, I wasn't really thinking about like exactly the concepts. It was just very like automatic. Like I just made work. Of course, I was reading about other artists and inspired the work, but it was very like fast. And I made this piece as well. It's just bed sheets, migrant bags, and luggage fabric.
The same bags that you had in the previous image.
Yeah. The same bag that I had in the previous images in the house. And then this is an installation shot in Mexico where people are viewing the work. That was in 2022. And this is called Eternal, homage to Teresa Margolles. And I vaporized the Rio Grande water with humidifiers. And this is a direct reference to Teresa Margolles' work, where she vaporizes water from the morgues. So Teresa Margolles is a conceptual artist, photographer, and her main medium of work comes from morgues themselves, which she transforms into sensory experiences to provoke the feelings of memory in her audience. And so I was thinking about how she worked with material and how she spoke about death in Mexico, and death associated with cartel violence, femicides, And then I was thinking about how she was working, and then the river was there immediately, on site. Like, I knew there was something there for me to do, so I gathered water and vaporized the water from the Rio Grande. I like to think that, I mean, we speak about how this could be symbolizing like people, maybe like I think about Oscar and Valeria, like the people that I commemorate in the piece, but it was more like a I don't know, just a decision that I made quickly and
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Salvadorians, of course, and what I think is interesting about this piece and also her piece is, you know, it's something tangible that's laden with all kind of poetic and material significance that is dispersed almost into nothingness, really pointing out the ephemerality. I mean, in her case, she's making them into bubbles that pop on someone's skin or on the wall of the gallery, and in this case, it's literal, you know, liquid being transferred to air. But it's a really interesting way to kind of think about death as something that conceptually, you know, lives on as a memory or something that's ephemeral, even if you have a tombstone or some kind of physical marker. Flowers. Love it. I think
my child's everything.
Yeah.
This is the close-up shot. And then I continued making work. Most of them were made in 2020, and I made this video called An Open Wound, which is a direct reference to Gloria Anzaldúa, who was an American scholar of Chicana feminism, cultural theory, and queer theory, born in Harlingen, Texas, a city located in the Rio Grande Valley, the same region I grew up in. And this is a piece that is a direct reference to her quote that she made in one of her books. I can't remember, but the quote says like this: "The U.S.-Mexican border es una herida abierta. It's an open wound, where the third world grates against the first and bleeds, and before its gap forms, it hemorrhages again, the lifeblood of two worlds merging to form a third country, a border culture." And this piece was very, again, it was like very quick, and I don't have a statement for it, but it can have multiple meanings.
I feel like this is the kind of work that needs no statement. It's it's very powerful. Also, you know, as someone who's never visited the Rio Grande, it's
This is an excerpt, so like a small part of the video. It's 10 minutes long, where I capture the sound of the river landscape. With my field recorder, I captured the sound. I was really interested in capturing the border bamboo all across the Rio Grande River, all the river landscape. It's full of border bamboo. So border bamboo has a really eerie sound when the bamboo clashes with each other. And I was really interested in capturing the eerie sound that I was producing to sort of think about how the audience could be re-engaged with the violence or displacement of people there. And the sound was the main thing for me, the sound. And then I embedded the red tent, thinking about Gloria Anzaldúa's quote. You know, I think about it as it can have multiple meanings. We could talk about my identity, being Mexican American, but it can also speak to realities there. I also made Wait, Hope, and Espera, Esperanza, and I was thinking about multiple ways of waiting, because during that time I was crossing the border and I would wait in the border. I was waiting in the car to cross over, but I would also see a lot of asylum seekers like a few feet away, waiting to seek asylum. So I was thinking about waiting and hope, and I also thought espera, esperanza rhymes. So I thought it was a beautiful way to name this. It was a project that I made really quickly, and I don't know if it's finished. Maybe it was a creative exercise at the moment, or something that I wanted to do. But I was thinking about how this newspaper could be passed out, because I would see people passing out newspapers in the border, or there's a lot of like street vendors. So I was thinking about how a newspaper could serve as information or inform people.
In an ideal context, would this be something distributed, or is it meant to kind of be a more poetic visual document for? I'm imagining this is exhibited in a gallery.
Well, now that you mention it, I think it can be more as a poetic like idea, because I never finalized my project. I did make it, but I never distributed it, and so I still have it. I think I exhibited it once, but I like the idea of how it could live as a poetic. What did we say? Like a poetic.
Like, I don't even remember. A poetic document. Yeah.
And I think that's where, like, that's where I find freedom in creating work, like leaving room for other things to happen, and I'm really open to that. And then I went back to making work that speaks about remittances, migration. After experiencing another family member passing away and remitting ashes and a trunk back to Mexico, I made a series of works dedicated to him. And this piece, For Those Who Do Not Return in Life, There Is Always Death, I was exploring the notion of traslados, which are transfers that are remitting cadavers over long distances for burial in the hometown. And here was, this piece has commemorative text on a rear back window, and it suggests the desire to be remitted back. And it also, for me, symbolizes maybe like my identity to the Mexican landscape, or my desire to be buried back. Or also it speaks to the ambiguous state produced by migration.
I know you have other images later, but maybe if you could speak more about Ford F-150 or Tropiando, and why is this the rear window of a truck that's emblazoned with these words?
So this piece was created based on a lot of experiences, but also research, and also looking at everyday signs in the street. It's a combination of like being around Ford F-150 pickup trucks, and then also seeing family albums with photos of family members with their cars, very proud, and then like seeing the landscape of a big US city, and then sort of like seeing the tension there. That I don't know, there was a tension there because they were looking very directly into the camera and like looking very proud in their trucks. And so it's a combination of that, but also how family members passed over periods of time, and how it was we were practicing remitting people back home. And then it's also like seeing some of the decals and these pickup trucks. These decals are usually symbols that identify their place of origin or identifies like their attitude. And this culture is called troqueando, which is a subculture. It's of new Mexican Americans that values trucks that are low to the ground, or slam trucks. They also like to burn out in the street, and they listen to corridos tumbados, which is a music style, an emerging music style that has been evolving for like 200 years since the accordion came from Germany to Mexico. And so one of the latest musicians that has impacted the genre is Nathaniel Cano, and there's a lot of variations within the music. There's like sad songs and like songs that are corridos and traps. It's like a trap urban corrido because of its evolution in the United States. So all of that culture has also been embedded within the work. And I see the vinyl that is in the pickup trucks as these like memorial texts. Sometimes these people memorialize someone who has passed, and then I sort of like thought about a way to creatively memorialize my family member who passed, and like memorialize think about the Mexican diaspora and like the relationship to the United States the United States and the place of origin. I think anywhere around the world, because I'm really thinking about the ancestral land as it relates to the urban landscape. So I think. There's an installation shot at Presa House Gallery, an exhibition curated by Rigoberto Luna in San Antonio, Texas. And this is an installation shot where I really wanted to capture the rear back window and the humidifiers in the background. Because the humidifiers, if you look closely, you can see the water being vaporized. So we have 3 bodies of work there. The one in the middle is the sound of the burning of tires.
I love that you keep on incorporating these soundscapes to these, because, just on a pedestal like that, I mean, it has a very funerary kind of aspect to it. So to hear the burning sound of the tires screeching on the pavement, I feel like it's a very activating sound. That's, kind of like different sensorial things that are happening for sure.
And they're also like different experiences. This is a piece of work, like the first piece of glass work that I made called Norteado. And this piece is made out of Ford F-150 tinted glass shards and caps and embroidered text. Many of the works are made out of impulse, based on my experience and knowledge. I think this piece does not speak to migration from one direction to another, like very vertical. Is usually associated from south to north, or migration back and forth in the border region. Here, I really wanted to capture all the forces displacing communities, such as economic inequality, capitalism, racism, violence. And so these hats are 4 hats stacked to each other. But I was also thinking about the troqueando subculture and how they dress in a particular ranchera style way, but they also have this American inspiration in their attire. They usually wear baggy pants. They wear fitted caps that are sort of want to look like they're like low profile or like of some sort of subculture. And so I was looking at a lot of different things at the same time.
I really love the shattered glass. Also another kind of reference that Teresa Margolles, but just, you know, the fact that this polarized dark glass, you know, can be a symbol of like pride in your car, or, you know, if you have access to tint your windows, you know, this is like the vehicle that you're proud of, but when shattered, very clearly allude to violence or to even a dream being shattered or something. I don't know if that resonates for you or.
Yeah, I think about the embedded meaning within the material. I think about opacity and how it can destabilize structures of power. People often want to categorize you, to understand you, out of fear of being a threat to them. And I think there's real power in not being identified or understood. And I continue thinking about glass and current works. This is a close-up of one of the hats. I wanted the hats to seem as if they were outside because of how people place their hats. You know, they usually want to look like they have a lot of glow, they want to be cool. And I was looking at a lot of musicians, singers that have a lot of style, and looking at the tropiano culture. And sort of like reimagining what a sombrero could be. Usually the sombrero is associated to Mexicans or Mexicans that are lazy. There's like the famous sombrero that is really long and that is covering a person in the floor, like the lazy Mexican. So I was really totally reimagining that to be something more. And, you know, a person that is knowledgeable, that is really thinking about their place in the world, about how they can better themselves, about how they can shine, and about how they don't have to, you know, sort of like, I don't know, like respond to people in power, or just like they're truly proud of being Mexican American. They're truly proud of not speaking English correctly. They're truly proud about speaking Spanglish.
About not being neatly categorized and legible all the time, which is an exhausting life to live, for sure.
And like there's other aspect that I was really interested in, like the psychological isolation or disorientation that happens when you're in another country. But really like the transformational aspect, like there's a lot of growth within these challenges, with these challenging moments. Like you really do come to really be you, and like you know, distinguish yourself, like, you know, and really be part of a community. And so I was really thinking about like all of that at the same time. I continue to think about tropiano culture. This is a performance I made back in 2021. This was the year that my family member passed away. And this is called For Those Who Do Not Return in Life. There's Always Death, a homage to David Gomez. And this was in 2021. It was what I find striking is that the piece, the sculptural piece with the same name, was made in 2020. But I almost kind of knew our destiny, or like fate, like what was going to happen. I think I was really prepared to his death, and a series of works happened after that. This is a photo performance piece that I made. Here in the window, you can see the vinyl. I started to think about how I can put this sculptural piece in motion, thinking about troqueando and burnouts. And I was listening to a lot of music at that time, and I was really letting the music and the lyrics really sink in. It's a very melancholic music, but at the same time it's very proudful. So it was a mix of both. I love how the presence of a burnout, but also love sort of like the seeing the smoke and how sad and poetic it can be. And this piece, I was really interested in the mark in the street and the smoke that it produced.
I mean, I think even the title is quite optimistic, right? For those that don't return in life, there's death. It's a melancholy that's paired with a kind of realistic optimism about the fact that life is cyclical and that there's different ways of honoring people, both alive and dead. I wonder, I don't know if you have any images. Oh, the next image is of the tire mark. If you could just talk about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about, so this was a photo performance, and I directed this entire performance. I was inside the car, so I did not take the photos. And I thought about how a photograph captures a moment that had passed, and that it's sort of a mark of time passing, and how a photograph can also be a mark of time passing. And performance is also very ephemeral. So I combine all these disciplines to make this piece. And yeah, I was just drawn how the mark, like the performance could leave a mark over time.
I just noticed we're at 48 minutes, so if you want to just touch on like the most important ones, just because I'm sure there are folks in the audience who have questions.
Yeah, thank you for getting time. This was I'm going to show a quick video of the burnout. I'm going to fast forward and show the smoke in motion. This was a stationary burnout. So just like a stationary burnout in the space due to the limited amount of space in the area. And then I made a second burnout in 2022, and I was continuing to explore funerary rituals and Mexican vigils. So here I conduct another performance, but I think about the different steps for a funerary event. So there's a vigil. So the first part of this performance was there was music, there was drinks, there was food for attendees, and they were allowed to look for velar, like vigil, like grieve or honor the, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
To grieve and honor or look at the truck that was in the parking space. And I placed a bunch of flowers in the truck bed as if it was a body, or so people can like participate in that. And then after that, people were directed to move away from the burnout, and they were allowed to see the burnout happen. And this happened at Lawndale Art Center. This was a residency that I was on in 2022. And again, it was the same thing. I wanted it to be photo performative to capture the performance, but also think about mark making, a photo as a mark or a trace left behind. And something that is not visible, but I was really intentional about was how the burnout driver, Elijah, I told him to wear a Mexican away t-shirt, a Mexican soccer away t-shirt, because I was thinking about the home and away t-shirts, but also like because growing up in a Mexican household, like we grew up watching football. I played football, and just thinking about that. And I like how it's not as like evidence. Like this photo actually is not part of the series. It's sort of hidden. It's a hidden gem, but you're seeing it for the first time. And these are photos like this, as part of the series. This photo is not visible as well, but I'd like to be in it too. A document that was there. And this is how it exists. It's a series of photos. And they're very intimate, so you have to get really close. Spanning roads. This is a series of steel rods. A series of steel rods where I think about the fitted cap, and how like really combining remittances, rituals, and thinking about how places can be formed simultaneously without being there. And so like the steel rod is like I think about it as a structural element, and then the glass are more like the ephemeral qualities within architectural spaces. Eventually, my goal is to make facades that have a very hybridized nature to them. So like thinking about concrete and marble, and like making just a combination of facades, really imagining how a building could be.
Which is also the process of, you know, when you send remittances over to build your dream house, it's that process of imagination.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about that architecture.
Yeah, like there's no architectural plan. It comes from memory, or like what you want your house to be. It's just very immediate. It comes from looking at other houses and like thinking, okay, I want my house to look like that. And which is an interesting process. Like there's architecture with the architects. And this is the column that I made, one of the first architectural, like structural sculptures that I make. In this space, I wanted to expose the column that already existed at Lawndale Art Center. And so I made a simple column in the middle with steel rods facing up, which are, these steel rods are ubiquitous in Latin America. They're left exposed to the sky in order to build in the future. And I was thinking about like loved ones in the sky who are looking down, and this piece is called An Angel in the Sky. So thinking about like people, houses,
architectural optimism. Yeah, and the dream that goes on and on.
Yeah. And I'm finally going to share this piece as well, because it's one of my most recent work, and this is the direction I'm going to also continue. This is a series called To Know and to Dream at the Same Time, which thinks about how I'm very conscious about the world, and also I have dreams. And just like working about, like continuing to work with the truck with photographs, and thinking about commemorating loved ones, and also thinking about the consequences of dispersing family members across geographies and in chalk pieces. So these are chalk pieces that are cut with shears and aluminum photos that have family photographs on them and decals. So this is a Mexican soccer decal over here on the left. And family photos are family members working. I'm skipping over a few slides, but I think this captures a lot of my work now. And currently I'm working on continuing my interest in glass and commemorative text, but I'm also integrating silver leaf, because I think it points to remittances or capital, and thinking about ritual and capital and what that happens to everyday lives, and how, yeah, I'm still conceptualizing it, but it's something that I've been really eager to get into, and I thought this would be a really good time to do it at ISCP because they're small and they're shippable, so I can return them to Houston. And so it was a challenge to keep it small because I always work big, but I think it was a good exercise because all of my focus is like with the text and the silver.
I also love that these point to that visibility and opacity question, in that, you know, you're not really able to fully read the text, right? Maybe if you've seen something like that in the landscape, you might recognize it, but it's not immediately clear to the viewer. And then also the silver itself is very reflective, so you get a sense of your own reflection, but it's distorted, or it's you know, this hazy vision. But definitely want to open it up. I know people probably have questions, so
yeah, we'll take 2 questions. Just because we are running a little close to time, but thank you so much for your time and for your presence today. I'm really happy to finally meet Alex, and just so happy to be here. I'm really saddened to leave soon.
You'll be back.
What is a burnout?
A burnout is a vehicular burnout. A burnout can happen in any sort of car or even motorcycles. And a burnout is where you press really hard in the accelerator and brake at the same time and then produce smoke. And it usually smells like rubber.
Does it damage the engine? I mean, does it leave damage to the vehicle?
There's a lot of damage to the vehicle. The tires se desgastan, like
They're worn out, the tires.
the tires get worn out, and it costs money, but a lot of people love to break the car down, like they love to treat it really bad and continue to adorn it or like modify it. Like that's why work is related to cars or truck culture, because there's this constant aspect of like getting beat down and trying to like modify it or improve it. But that's what a burnout is, and it's usually practiced in empty parking spaces or in urban highways to disturb traffic. And so I love how it disturbs traffic because it's associated to like movement and capital, and how people of that subculture are disturbing the flow of just urbanism. And
also community gathering. Like in my research, I watched a lot of YouTube videos of burnouts in Texas, and usually while the burnouts are happening, people are grilling, there's music, there's beer, you know, it's kind of like everyone gets around to witness the spectacle. I feel like in your performance, it's very poetic, and it's kind of your interpretation of like, you know, a burnout with a very specific kind of conceptual vision behind it. But yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Magdalena.
I just wanted to ask about Verónica Gaona. She wrote about being on the border of identity, and I would like to ask you how does you, your feelings, also face struggling with not belonging to any group, like always be between them? Is it close to you? Is she wrote about?
Yes, I feel like I'm between two worlds, but at the same time, I don't let that sort of place me in a specific way. Like I continue to be open to experiences, because I think identity is not based on where you were born, but identity is based on different experiences that you have, and all these other people and communities around you that continue to sort of like create who you are. So I think identity is constantly in flux. Thank you.
There's a question also reference Borderlands as well, right? The kind of focus well, where in Padua, and I feel like this is more of a comment, because I think what she does in that text is she talks about the borderlands, but she also acts it as well in the way that there are parts of the text that are referencing Mexican culture, and you kind of read it and kind of try yourself to make sense of it. I guess what I'm saying is that I kind of sort of see that in your work too, where you're making reference to your experiences in your background, and us as an audience, we are meeting you where you're at. So I like that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you, Anne.
Can I ask one question? I just want to ask how your experience has been in New York. Have you spent extended time here? What are your impressions, and what that influence has had on your practice?
Yeah, I've loved my experience here. Like so I walk, which is very different to my life in Texas, where I move in cars. But walking has been really peaceful and like very meditative, and just meeting everyone. Everyone has been really open, and, you know, really open with their practice, but really open to like collaborating, meeting each other. And I'm really fascinated by the culture diversity that exists in Brooklyn. I'm also fascinated by seeing the Puerto Rican flags in the streets. You know, there's a lot of motorcycles that have the Puerto Rican flag in the back of their motorcycle, and I love the cultural pride. I've even seen like Puerto Rican flags in the buildings. There was one flag that I captured today, and so I'm really fascinated, and I think what I have experienced here will influence the work and over long periods of time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.